Good morning and welcome. My name is Martin Peagam, and it is my pleasure on behalf of Cleveland and Teesside Local History Society to welcome you all here today to the Frank Elgee Memorial Day School 2025. Before we begin, I must do some housekeeping. The owner of Preston Hall, where we meet, in 1825 was fearful that cinders from the new train on the Stockton Darlington Railway would set fire to the trees. If any sort of a fire occurred today, the alarms will sound and if no fire drill is expected to take place, I strongly advise you to evacuate using the doors to the rear of the hall. There is tea and coffee available next door, kindly provided by the museum. You can also eat in that room, and some of you will have brought packed lunches. For those of you who wish to purchase food, there are 3 outlets on site. A cafe as you enter the new part of the museum. Please access this through the Victorian Street. A cafe near the car park, and a small facility offering cold drinks and sweets in the Victorian Street. The toilets were an afterthought of the railways when they began. Darlington North Road Station opened in 1842. Toilets were installed in 1856 for men, 4 urinals and 6 cubicles. The ladies would have to wait until 1873, when 1 cubicle was provided, but only for those with first-class tickets. There were no facilities to wash hands, but I'm pleased to say that things are somewhat better today. You will find toilets by going through the billiard room. Please ignore the cistern on display in the cabinet. Make your way past it down the Victorian Street, and there you will find toilets. We are here to celebrate the Stockton Darlington Railway. A few months ago, a replica of locomotion number 1 arrived at Stockton Station. It had travelled over the period of several days from Children to Stockton. It pulled several replica children and a replica of a first coach called Experiment. Along the way, it had crossed the oldest railway bridge in the world still in use, the Skern Bridge in Darlington, designed by Ignatius Bonomi. It had passed the oldest railway station in the world, what would become that, at Hyington. It had been seen by thousands of people. Unlike the original, it was not overcrowded with passengers. It cannot have escaped your notice that this year there have been lots of celebrations and events to mark 200 years of a railway. These celebrations reflect the fact that the modern railway system in the UK and throughout the whole world had its birth with what happened between Stockton, Children and Stockton-on-Tees on the 27th of September 1825. Now, the birth may have been conceived in earlier events elsewhere, at Canfield, at Middleton near Leeds, at Wylam Colliery, at Coalbrookdale, Oystermouth, Surrey, at Kilmarnock, and many other places where man linked horses and then steam power to the movement of vehicles on railways. But it was with the Stockton Darlington Railway that the infant came bawling, or at least hissing, into the world. And that is why we are celebrating 200 years of a railway. The idea of a railway began with this man, Edward Pease, Quaker and businessman, who needed to get coal from a mines in southwest Durham to the busy port of Stockton on the River Tees as quickly as possible. It is sometimes forgotten that without the port at Stockton, the Stockton and Darlington Railway would not have been built. Stockton, not Darlington, was the destination. The idea was developed further by George Stephenson and delivered by Timothy Hackworth, and the locomotive built at Robert Stephenson's Fourth Road work in Newcastle and delivered by horse and cart a few days before the big day. Then it was reassembled, tested, and big day came. Why was the Stockton and Darlington Railway so important? The Stockton and Darlington Railway was the first railway designed to run on rails, powered by both horse and steam locomotive power, sanctioned by an Act of Parliament, intended for public use, and intended to carry both freight and passengers. Steam-powered railway didn't come about on the railway till 1833, but then besides that, there was horse-drawn passenger services offered on the railway. The Stockton and Darlington Railway had a major impact, not just locally, but across the world. It was more than a wagonway. It was a public railway for goods and passengers. It demonstrated the viability of steam-powered railway. It demonstrated to the world that a railway could be both a technical and a financial success. It was the birthplace of the modern railway that we know today. On the 27th of September 1825, the train had set off from Chiltern at 10 a.m., an hour later than planned. Crossed the Skerne Bridge, there were huge crowds along the whole route. It arrived at Stockton at 3:45 p.m. in the afternoon, where several cannons were fired to announce its arrival. The Durham Advertiser reported that it was greeted by a crowd of up to 40 to 50,000 people. The train arrived not at the station as we know it now, but at the quayside. The VIPs hurried off to Stockton Town Hall for a big celebration. The first train journey introduced the world to overcrowding, mechanical breakdowns, injury to passengers, and a delayed arrival time. It was overcrowded. 300 tickets had been issued, but it was said there was some 600 to 700 people on board. The train was late, as we've heard, and there was notice about the day had said that the proprietors and nobility and gentry, as may honour them with their company, would dine promptly at 3 o'clock at the town hall. The guests took their seats at the dining table, however, later than expected. As we said, the train arrived at 3:45, so some of them might have been wondering, as the meal commenced and the first of 23 toasts were drunk, whether they would make it back to the wharf to board the conveyances which they had been promised would leave there precisely at 7 o'clock. The late arrival was partly due to a breakdown. A wagon with a faulty wheel had to be removed, and there had been a 35-minute stoppage while a piece of oakum was removed from a feed pipe. There had also been, just outside Stockton, a casualty. The Durham Advertiser tells us that a poor fellow dressed like a sailor named John Stevens fell from a train and that the wheels of a coach crushed one of his feet. That, it was said, it is believed that amputation must be resorted to save his life. But frustratingly does not tell us whether John Stevens lived or died. Incidentally, casualties were to become a regular feature of the new transport system, whether employees, passengers or members of the public, whether the result of boiler explosions, mechanical failures or drunken drivers. Nevertheless, as the cannon boomed across the River Tees, it was clear that sunny afternoon that the world had changed. The modern railway system had arrived. Railways would spread rapidly, nationally and internationally. They changed the world. They changed trade, as goods from one part of the country could be transported to another in bulk and quickly. Fresh food could be brought from the countryside and the coast to the growing towns. They changed what people did for leisure. Football became a national sport. People went on holidays. They changed the way that wars were fought. They changed towns, cities, empires. They even changed what we read and watch. Where would Agatha be without the railways? Thanks to this man, Thomas Maynell, the chairman of the Stockton Darlington Railway, who built a branch line to a depot serving Yarm, the Stockton Darlington Railway gave us the first railway pub in the world, the New Inn. It opened on the 17th of October 1825, just 20 days after the first journey and has traded continuously for 200 years. I can well recommend you paying a visit there. You can still get a pint at the oldest railway pub in the world, now called the Cleveland Bay. People working in the furniture, shipyards and factories of Teesside could enjoy a trip to the seaside. And most importantly, because produce could be brought from countryside and the coast to the growing populations of the cities, railway gave us our national dish. The fact that the first train was late is very significant. Railways brought with them an unhealthy, possibly unhealthy obsession with time and punctuality. In 1847, the railway companies agreed to coordinate their timetables using Greenwich Mean Time, although they had to wait, another delay, until 1852 when the Shepherd motor clock was installed by George Biddle Airy at the Royal Observatory at Greenwich, and hourly time signals could be transmitted to railway stations throughout the country. And that obsession with time and punctuality will be very evident today. I have told all the speakers that we will be sticking closely to our timetable. Elgee Memorial Lectures have been held for over 50 years, with contributions from the Cleveland and Teesside Local History Society, Teesside Archaeological Society, the Cleveland Industrial Archaeology Society, and the Cleveland Naturalist Field Club, reflecting the diverse interests of Frank Elgee. Frank Elgee was an amazing gentleman. I have a particular affinity with him as following an illness he was partially deaf. Born in Northampton in 1880, and despite an education disrupted by illness, Elgee went on to become a highly respected archaeologist, geologist, and naturalist. Over a period of 20 years, Elgee wrote many books and papers on the North York Moors. In 1923, Elgee became curator of the Dorman Museum, Middlesbrough, having been assistant curator since 1904. Sadly, just 10 years later in 1933, he resigned as curator due to his ill health. His wife, Harriet, was appointed curator, holding that position until 1938. Elgee was held in high regard, and in 1953, a very appropriate memorial to Frank Elgee was unveiled on his beloved North York Moors on Blakey Ridge. Today, we four societies gather together in the Frank Elgee Memorial Day School, with presentations exploring the impact of the railways in the context of local history, local archaeology, local industrial archaeology, and nature. We do so a short distance from where the then unnamed but later called locomotion steam engine hauled its train on that momentous day. It even engaged in a race with a stagecoach pulled by horses, as seen in these two paintings, a symbolic representation of a past being overtaken by the future. The man who built this wonderful building, David Burton Fowler, was no fan of the railways. The 90-year-old Fowler, a former clerk to the Exchequer, built his house in 1825. He must have been glad that the house he built looked out onto the River Tees and the Cleveland Hills and not onto that noisy, dirty contraption running through his back garden. I wonder what he would have thought about the fact that lots of people today can wander through his house and discover the history of Stockton, visit the wonderful walled garden, enjoy refreshments in a cafe, walk, run, cycle by the river, swim or canoe in the river, and children can have a wonderful time in the play area. They can even enjoy the wonderful new extension opened only a few months ago, something that you can do today. We have with us today representatives of some of the societies that annually present the Frank Elgee Memorial Lecture. Alan Bettany will speak on behalf of CIAS. Alan will tell us about the impact of the Stockton Darlington Railway on Stockton-on-Tees. Michael Thompson will speak on behalf of Teesside Archaeological Society. He will take us on a journey from Stockton to Redcar, visiting lost stations, people and events. We also have some special guests. Research to learn more about the past never ends. I'm delighted that we have with us Dr. Emma Watson of Tees Archaeology, who will share with us the findings from several archaeological digs that have taken place this year here within the grounds of Preston Park. Emma will also take people, if they wish, for a guided tour of the sites of those digs. I'm also delighted that to start the programme we have with us Gillian Bryant. The Cleveland and Teesside Local History Society and the Friends of the Stockton Darlington Railway have collaborated this year to encourage research and writing about the Stockton Darlington Railway. We promoted a competition, Research on the Rails. The winning essay, written by Gillian, shed light on a forgotten character associated with the railways and on the fascinating business environment that existed in the early days of the railway. We may also have noticed that I have not yet mentioned the fourth body involved in the delivery of Frank Elgee Memorial Lectures at the Cleveland Field Naturalist Club. They, like all the societies, have a stall here, and I would encourage you all to visit those during the day. I did not want, however, the day to pass without some mention of the relationship between the railways and nature. Railways change the environment. They carved tracks through the countryside. They allowed farm products to travel a greater distance than they had previously, and thus changed the whole nature and impact of farming and fishing industries. Railways continue 200 years later to impact on nature. Witness the concerns about the HS2 line as it carves its way through pristine countryside, all to save us a few minutes on the time taken to reach London. But also witness how nature fights back. Just a month ago, on the 17th of October 2025, an event took place at what was once a railway that shared the same initials as the Stockton Darlington Railway, the Somerset and Dorset Railway, also known as the Serene and Delightful or the Slow and Doubtful. It ran for over 100 years and closed by Dr. Beeching in 1965. The tracks were removed and the track beds, as with other lines, were reclaimed by nature. On the 17th of October, those track beds were reopened as a walking and cycling route, part of a 76 miles of the Somerset Circle. Like similar schemes elsewhere, it will have an impact on leisure, on the rural economy, on people's health, and on flora and fauna. Railways have also carried those interested in studying nature into the countryside. In Manchester, there is a pub called the Railway and Naturalist. It was formerly the Naturalist from 1850, changed its name with the arrival of the Manchester and Bury Railway in 1879. It was a meeting place of the artisan naturalists. They were one of the first self-taught working-class botanists. They collected and catalogued plants and flowers, walking big distances from Prestwick. The artisan naturalists gained the idea that you had to be upper class to be a scientist or botanist, and they were part of a general movement of working-class people who had a craving for science and knowledge and a determination to teach others. One of the main protagonists, John Horsfield, was a handloom weaver. Early explorations were on Cursor Moor, but the arrival of the railways allowed them to travel further afield. Robert Thursgood said of the group, "They were not unique, but they were pioneers." And of the pub, he said, "The Railway Naturalists pub stands as a fantastic monument to working-class endeavour in the field of scientific inquiry." Frank Elgee himself used the railways. Early in his life, he received a prize from a Northern Weekly Gazette for the best contribution on entomology or astronomy. He used it toward bus and train fares whilst he explored the North York Moors. In later years, he used the railway to commute from his home in Commondale to his place of work, the Dorman Museum. Apparently, like thousands of workers and students today who open their laptops the moment they're seated, he used the time travelling productively. Frank Elgee's second book, Early Man in North East Yorkshire, was written on these daily commutes in 1930. The Cleveland Field Naturalist Club was founded in 1881, and records show that members took part in regular excursions to the countryside and seaside to get close to nature. And they used the railway. In 1895, the annual report of activities says that on the 1st of June, the group had an excursion to Rundit Bay and record their observations on approaching Rundit Bay from the railway station, Hinderwell. I think it's reasonable to assume that the mention of a railway station is not just as a geographical reference point, they'd actually arrived there by train. The members were also aware of the impact of the railways. In 1899, on the 25th of August, a party of 8 walked from Newport Farm to Billingham. It was noticed that the new railway and road from Stockton to Haverton Hill were already making great alterations to the locality. Sadly, it does not record what impact those alterations were having on the landscape and natural environment. Frank Elgee was Assistant Secretary to the Cleveland Naturalists from 1899 to 1906, and Secretary from 1907 to 1901, and President from 1922 to 1923. On the 18th of May 1901, 30 members met at Kilton, most of whom went by the early train to Carlin Howe. The annual report for 1903, was Frank Elgee one of them? The annual report for 1903, possibly written in part by Frank Elgee, reports on a number of excursions by train. Several of our members and some friends journeyed to Loftus by an earlier train, and a party of about 21 attended. Some travelled to Carlton by wagonette, others by rail, and 1 or 2 by bike. The club also welcomed guest speakers to meetings of a literary and philosophical institute in Middlesbrough. Those speakers came from Redcar, Stockton, Saltburn, and further afield. Perhaps they travelled by train. The Cleveland Field Naturalist Club went one step further, a step which perhaps today we would welcome. Their report says that we are indebted to the North Eastern Railway for the special privileges granted to our members by them. Did they have discounted rail travel? Did they have rail cards? Something we need to look into. I think Frank Elgee would be delighted, as I am, to see so many gathered here to share research and knowledge about history, archaeology, and nature. Those things he was passionate about on the 200th anniversary of the Stockton and Darlington Railway. And it now gives me great pleasure to invite Gillian Bryant to present the first paper of this day school.